IQueryable and IEnumerable is one key interface in ASP.NET Core. So whenever you are building a web API or whenever you are working with any .NET related application, you might always query data and you will always work with data. How do you optimize the data, and when to use IQueryable and when to use IEnumerable? This is what we are going to talk about in today's video. Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. So if you are new to the channel, please do subscribe. In this YouTube channel, we talk about Azure, .NET, and software development as a whole. So in today's video, we are going to learn about IQueryable and IEnumerable. By the end of the video, you know where to use IQueryable and IEnumerable. We are going to build a simple web API, and then we will come up with a scenario where we should use IEnumerable and where to use IQueryable, and then we will see how these things work differently. So in general, IQueryable mostly query data with a certain filtering in the database straightforward, but with IEnumerable, you always get the data before the filtering can apply from the client side. But always, what we need to keep in mind that whenever we are using IEnumerable, all the data will be loaded in the database or in memory. So all the data will be loaded in memory before anything can apply to. But with IQueryable, we get what we request for. So I'm going to show you what the difference is and when to use it. So welcome, and don't forget to subscribe. So let's start. I have my rider here, and I'm going to create a new project, and then we can then go and create a simple web API using SQLite. So I'm going to click on new solution right here, and it is giving me an option to basically choose the name of the project and where I want to place it. So the name of the project is going to be very simple. I'm going to create it, and second, I'm going to choose where I want to put, place it or something like that. So I'm going to post everything in here. So I have my YouTube channel here, and I'm going to select this so that it will be available on the GitHub for you to. So I'm going to give it a name of IQueryable IEnumerable API. So let's add API to it so that we know that this is an API, and in here is going to be web API, and with rider here we can go down and see that we want to use controller based, not minimum API or minimal API. So we're going to create this, and then boom, I have my project here which we can then get started with. So we have this project bootstrap for us, and it's simple. So whenever you are creating your project with something like Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, you can always decide to use a controller-based approach where you get some kind of weather forecast API as a default or from a template. So that is what we have right here now, and we are going to customize this to suit our need. The goal is to learn about IQueryable and IEnumerable. So that is what we are going to focus on. So the second thing for us to do is to clean up the project. So we're going to clean up and we go fast, and then we are going to create a simple web API. So if you don't know how to create a web API, I already have videos in this YouTube channel that teaches you how to create a web API with ASP.NET Core. So you can go and check it out. And this is straightforward. We are not going to focus on how to create a web API, but how to use IQueryable and IEnumerable. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to delete weather forecast. You can go to the controller, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and delete this ASAP. So that is it. So what I'm going to do is create a simple folder structure for this project, and what I'm going to do is that first of all, I'm going to create a folder called construct. So let's go ahead and create a folder called construct here. So we have a construct which we are going to put our DTO in. If you have been following my videos or if you have been watching my videos, you know that I always put DTOs in construct folder. You can create your own DTO folder. And the next thing that we want to do is that create something like data. So we're going to create a folder called data. We are not following any architect. We just want to have a web API running. So we're going to go and create a data folder where we put our DB contest and everything in. But one thing that we also need, that we need model. So we're going to create that folder right here, and I'm going to call it models right here. So this is going to have our model where, and then we are going to have what we call service. That is where we'll be doing all our service in. So we have service, and then the last thing that we want to create is interface, and we can put the interface also in the construct, right? So let's do that. So the first thing that we need to do is go ahead and then create our model. So I'm going to create, in this scenario that we are using, we are going to use something like employee, where we have a data of employee. So we want to fetch the data. We want to work with something like employee data. So we're going to create a lot of data in our database and see which one is more performing, IQueryable and IEnumerable, where we use both of them. So I'm going to create a model right here, and I'm going to call it employee. So we're going to create a new C# class, and then we call it employee, and we want to add this to Git, so we don't go into us again. So this is it. So this is going to be employee, and the first thing that we need is we need an ID. So the goal is that we have all the data ready abstract. So this is the data we are going to work with, and then the goal is that we have ID of employee, we have the name, we have the email, and we have the salary or something like that. So we are going to work with this data. So this is what we will working. And then the second thing that we need to do is to set up our database. So with this one, we are going to use SQLite. So we're going to go from Nuggets here, and then what we are going to do from Nuggets is to install the SQLite provider. So we're going to do that. So let's first of all install entity framework called design, but make sure not to choose the version that you are. If you're using .NET 8 or .NET 9, you can choose, don't go and choose .NET 10 if you don't have .NET 10 installed. I have .NET 9, so I'm going to use .NET 9, and in here I'm going to add it to the project. And then the next thing that we want to use is the SQL Microsoft Entity Framework .SQLite. This is what we want to also go ahead and install that. So we just install that one too. So we have that one to also use here, and then we choose that. So we're going to click here, and then we also want .NET 9, and we add that one to the project itself. Okay, so now we have our SQLite already set up for us. So the next thing that we want to do is that we want to go to the data folder and then create our contest. So we're going to create a class called AppDB contest, and as you already know, the contest help us to talk to our database. So the contents connect to our model, and then it will connect to our database, right? So this is why we use entity. So to annotate this as a DB contest, we mostly do DB contest. So we do DB contest from entity. So the entity framework call would then annotate this as a contest. So, and then the second thing we want to do is that we want to do public. We call this, and then okay, this is, so we want to do this, and then we call this our app DB contest right here. This is what we want, and then we say that with the entity framework call that this is going to be our app DB contest, and then we see something like this. And then what we will do next is that we want to insert this, our employee model, here into the database. So we're going to have the DB set coming in, and then we probably will go and say that employee here, and then we give it a database name. But if you want, you can also do something like this right here, and then you set this, and right now we have everything set. So this is our DB contest. And then one thing that we want us to create is we're going to create interface, because we are going to do that. So we create interface here, we name it employee service, and this is going to be an interface with some of the services that we are going to use to demonstrate what we are going to work on. But before then, let's go and create employee DTO. So with the employee DTO, which contains how we want certain data to be, so we create this employee DTO, and what we are interested in is that we are going to say create and response So let's go and have this. So what we do is that we create employee request DTO. This helps us to create, because with this API we're going to create the data, and then node after that we work with the data with using IQueryable and IEnumerable. So we have this DTO setting it up, and the next thing is that we then can bring all the interfaces that I have in here, which I'm going to explain deeply this, because this is where the IEnumerable and the IQueryable concepts start from. So this is our DTO. So this is, let's try and then bring in our employee class. Okay, good. So what is happening right here is that we have a task here, and then you see that when we give this certain things, some of them are kind of list, and then we have this, and then we have this. The point is that we are fetching some data, and then when we get to the service, you see how we use IQueryable and IEnumerable, because under the hood, IQueryable and IEnumerable is kind of a correction, right? So we have those interfaces, but it does something different. It sounds similar. I mean, it's kind of looks similar, but it does different thing. So that is one thing that we need to do. So we can go to the service, and then now we have this. So we're going to create employee service, and that is where the magic starts from. So we're going to go to this employee service right here, and then we add a service. So we're going to add a service, and then we bring in the interface right here. So we're going to have the I. So we're going to have the I service right here, and then I'm going to implement all the interfaces that we need. So we can go ahead and then implement all the services here. This is what we are going to work on. So all of them are now, it's kind of a list, but let's get to understand the difference between IQueryable and IEnumerable before we get started. So the concept is that IEnumerable and IQueryable help us to fetch data. So whenever we are working on with our application, we want to fetch the data, and then we want to use the data in a certain way. So as I said, we are going to have employee data where we fetch all the data from the database, or we want to get a certain data from the database. So IEnumerable will go to the database and say, hey, give me all the data. And then when the data comes in for the client side, that is where we apply any filtering to it. So it will load all the information in the database. But with the IQueryable, what happens is that the filtering or the specification that we are giving to it, it go to the database and fetch that one for us instead of giving us everything. So that is the difference. So we are going to learn where to use each other. So let's try to have a proper namespace and remove the model. We don't want to use the model self. So we're going to have a proper, we are going to bring all the namespace instead of doing this. So let's go here. Let's make sure we have this. Let's go to the DTO, and then let's go here. Where is the employee model? We have a public class of employee model, so this should be available here for us. But why we need a namespace to bring this? So we can go ahead and use the namespace. Okay. It's saying that the return type should be, don't worry, we are going to, it doesn't match expected employee type. Yeah, for now, let's leave everything like that. So the next thing that we're going to do is we go in here, and then what we are going to do is that we're going to bring in the DB context right here. So we want to bring our database so that we can do some magic with this. So we say that public read only. So private read only instead. read only and say app db contest, and then in here we create a constructor for it, and this is it. So the first thing is that we're going to create in let's go and bring the creates at the top where we have the create. That is the first one. Okay, good. So what we're going to do is that we see that var create, let's say create employee. So it create employee, let's make sure to spell this more. Create employee is called to new employee. So we probably will have a new employee, and then we're going to say that, okay, we have a new employee. This no need to be annotated. So in here, we're going to say the ID. We should be getting the ID coming in. Okay. The employee namespace does not exist. But why are we not getting the employee? Because this should be employee service. This should be employee service, so that this namespace can just put up, right? Okay. So we made this employee instead of employee service. So in here now, you see that ID is go to GUI ID, because I always want the ID to be GUI. So we have a new GUI ID right here. Let's try to terminate this. So we see that name here is going to be employee.name. So we have everything working for us. And when we get that, the next thing that we want to do is that we do await. So let's try to make this async, and then let's go and make this await. So await, and then we're going to have our DB database contest, and it's a add. When we add, we try to save the changes. So we have our DB. We see that DB contest, save the changes. So when we save the changes, we then return a new response. So we see that a new create employee create employee DTO. So we can go to the DTO. This is what we want. So create employee. This should be let's have a proper O here. So create employee response. Now let's go to the interface. If we want, we can, but let's do this. So when we come here, this is going to be a new. So when we are done, we want to return something, and we're going to see that the same thing, right? And then we annotate this. So this will help us to create this. So let's make sure that this is employee service, and this is just to create a demo of how we basically create this in the service. I'm not showing you the demo itself, but also showing you in how you use this in a service, and how you can work with it. So this is a complete video on it. So now that we have this will help us to create employee and get employee in the database. So that is it. So the next thing that we want to do is that when we have the employee, we basically want to get them. So that is why I have changed and make sure that this name normally sounds like what we want, right? Good name variable, name convention or something. So the next thing that we want to do is that get employee by using IEnumerable. So get employee by using IEnumerable. So now we have a service that will create employee into the database for us, but we want to also get them using IEnumerable, and this is where we need to pay attention to. So we are getting the data, and what happened is that default, as I said, this is sitting on the list correction, right? And we have to make sure that with the IQueryable, we get it as a query, and then we have to make sure that we then say that to list. But with IEnumerable, because it's giving us all the data and it's already list, so it's already list, so we just say that to list, right? Or we can say return as IEnumerable. And so what we are doing is that with the interface level, we can specify that this will return IEnumerable or this return IQueryable. But to make it more concise or minimum, we can do that one in the service and say that, oh, hey, this data that is coming in, transfer this data to IEnumerable or IQueryable. So this helps us to push the data into IQueryable and IEnumerable straightforward. So in the service. So here, this is going to be IEnumerable because here we say that get the data as IEnumerable. So we're going to say that var employee right here. So var employee here, and then we can do this. We can do this and it will work. But to make it more precise for you, we can say that this is going to be to list sync. To list sync right here, and then now you see we cannot return it like that. So when we get this to list sync, we have to make sure that we are then transfer this data to IEnumerable. So we can say that return employee right here, and then we say that as IEnumerable. So return the employee as enumerable, right? So employee, return employee as enumerable. So before we do that, let's make sure that this is async. So this is the async and this is the list, and then we do that, we go in here. So then this is going to be await, and then this is going to be as enumerable. And then when we get that, now we can then transfer this to list. So that is it. We get it, the data as a list, and then we are returning it as enumerable list. That is it. But now let's see Queryable. How are we going to do this with Queryable? So with the Queryable, we can say that we want to get all the employees from our database, and it's going to be very simple. We can say that we can make this async. So because let's make this async right there. So when we make this async, you can say that return, and then you see that await, and we go into our database. So we go into our database, and then what happens is that we get our employee. So the database should give us this, and then now we can say that as Queryable. So we get this as Queryable, but for us to use it, we have to make sure that we put this to a list. So this is how you might use Queryable. And then that is it. So this is also Queryable, and this is how you use. So we can also get employee hire payment using IEnumerable, and we can also search using IEnumerable and IQueryable. So enumerable and Queryable, and IEnumerable and IQueryable. So that is it. It's the same, right? But because this is an interface, right? So if I specify this in the in an interface level, this is going to be IEnumerable. So here you can do IEnumerable. So if I do IEnumerable, right? So I can see IEnumerable here, and then I'll get this as IEnumerable, and if I want, I can then see that I want this as a list. But for now, let's work it with it as a list, and then when we come to the service, we specify how we want it to do. So this is more efficient, right? So now for us to go ahead, we also want to do this, and this is where we want to get employee salary. based on some kind of their threshold or what are they getting, right? So we probably want to say that get var all employees. So first of all, we want to get our employees, and this is a scenario where we want to fetch a data in a certain scenario. But with IEnumerable, what is going to happen is that it will fetch the data before it apply the filtering. But with IQueryable, it will always do the filtering for us straightforward, and that is the difference. That is the difference straightforward. So we can go forward. So looking at the issue right here, Postman is not returning this. It turns out that this one is interface instead of controller. So this should be just a class. And we have a double class sitting in here. So we didn't do it well. So this controller was wrong. So now it was an interface at the top where we didn't notice that. So when we trigger this guy again, and now we want to go in here and try to post something, we should get a response and return this for us. Now it's working. So let's do it with a different names, because we are going to do different name. So let's have a Clifford. We're going to create a lot of data. So let's send Clifford with a different kind of maybe, right? And let's send it multiple times to create a lot of data, right? So we post, and that is it. Let's create more, so we can even put the AI to generate some. So say that use this to generate, right, 20, let's say 20 different requests, so that we can have a real data, right? Request. So it's going to generate some 20 different so do it like the same format. We are doing it in Postman. So this will generate everything for us. So we have about 20 data. So let's start creating them. So let me bring this one in here. And what is going to happen is that we're going to create them. So first of all, let's create this. We're going to create a lot of data right here. So this is bad. So we created this, and then we created this. This is doing it wrong. So the AI couldn't generate a request for us properly. So let's probably do it in a different way. It's using Clifford for everything. So you see Isaiah, and then let's do Isaiah 2 in a different way. So this is it. Now we have created a lot of data. The next thing is for us to get the data. So first of all, we're going to create a new request, and then this is going to be kind of a get request. And then what we are going to do is that this is going to use IQueryable. So the first one, when you go to our controller right here, so when we go to the controller, after we create, so if we want to get it with IEnumerable. So the first request we are going to do is going to get it with IEnumerable. So if I go in here and say that I want to do get request, so method not found, let's make sure we do this wall get API slash. So this is going to be IEnumerable. So we should make this IEnumerable instead. Okay. So instead of we going to say that employee, we're going to make sure that this is going to be IEnumerable, and when it's queryable, we then do the queryable too in there. So this is going to be enumerable. Let's hit send, and this fetch all the data we have created. So, and then under the hood, what is happening is that you can see that the time that they normally give us is this 5 milliseconds, because we don't have enough data, and it's already loaded into the in memory already. So this is what we need to notice. If you make it a request, the data is being already loaded into a memory already. So all the next request or the rest of the request is performing this from the memory itself. It's sort of the database, right? So that is how we load the data into the memory, and then we perform that shit. But Queryable always go to the database too. So if you also trying to think of where you want to load the data in the memory and work with it, so this is a different scenario where IQueryable also go and then fetch everything in the database level. So you check your database request, and then you can use something like cache to do all these things. So now, if it is Queryable, we go and say that give this, but the same thing, but this time around we are doing it in the Queryable format, right? That our services handle that. And the first one, we get this, and we get 5 milliseconds, and this is the same, but this is doing a different thing, and this is all of them are working perfect. So most of your application, your API, it might work though, but in a performance issue, you might do it in a different way, in a different scenario, right? So that is how it works. So we can perform the rest of the thing that we have in here. So we can go ahead and then you see that maybe get higher paid and everything. But what we want to do is that, let's close. This is or trying to open. We don't want to open this. Exit this Rust code from here. So this is how it works, right? So we can do the search and everything. So in a real scenario, we get it with Queryable, but it gives us the data, but one is going in there and give us from the database level, and one is doing it in memory level. It gives us all the data before it performs everything. So the code is available here on GitHub. You can go through and see where you want to use which one. So thank you for watching, and this is Cliff Tech. Don't forget to subscribe for more .NET content and Microsoft Agile content. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. So we want to use IEnumerable to solve this issue. So what we can do is, as we are doing, we first of all want to get the employee right here. So we say that employee, we get our employee. This suggestion is wrong. So we get our employees, and then we see that await, and then we go to our database and say appdb contest, and then we first of all going to go to our database and then do this. So when we get this, what we want to do is that we then specify some kind of we want to specify, let's make this a sync, because we want to get a certain threshold, right? So we get them by, because of, we are going to specify that we want to get users with maybe $20,000, right, from our database, who are making $20,000 or who has this kind of thing. And this is going to happen in memory, not direct in the database. So this is where you need to pay attention to. This is going to happen in memory, not in the database. So if you are going to fetch a lot of data from the database, it's more advisable to go for IQueryable instead of IEnumerable. But where you need a quick data and to load into the memory and then perform something, that is where you use IEnumerable. So in the scenario right here, we can go ahead and say that return our employee like this, and as we want to first of all make it as IEnumerable, but we want to specify something to where, so we want to see where employee, so it's employee. So let's make sure that it's employee dot, their kind of, we want to go to the salary here. It's here. We want to go and see that greater than the threshold, right? And then we probably want to order this order by descending, right? Order by so we say order by, so okay, so when we get it, we say that order by descending, so let's see how it works. So we want to then descend them. Okay, so this is not how it should be. So let's check this one wall where this is this, right? Specifically this is where, and then we say that order by descending, and then we pass in the salary right here to it. So descending and order by descending. So what I want to have is this, and then what we're going to do is that here we should be able to get the salary right here. Okay, order by descending, we are making this IEnumerable. So we probably wanted to order like this. So descending, right? Order everything by descending, and then later on put everything into a list, because as I said, we want it to be a list. So a list of employees, right? And then you can see that this is an IEnumerable of employees, right? So this is it. That this is how we do it in using IEnumerable or enumerable. So in the scenario where we want to fetch the data with some kind of a specification, this is how we do it, and how we are going to do it with IQueryable too. So this would then translate to SQL. So let's write this once here, right? And we're going to say we have a comment. We say that IEnumerable. So we see that IEnumerable. Okay, let's IEnumerable. Okay, let's spell this one IEnumerable. So IEnumerable approach, right? IEnumerable approach, and you see that filtering or filters in memory. So this happened in memory. So this happens in memory instead of happening straightforward in the database. So that is it. So this happened in memory. So all the specification that we have done in here, it's not going to go straight and give it to us. It's going to fetch the data before it apply this to it, right? So this is a real world scenario where you understand IEnumerable here. So now, what if we want to do this with IQueryable? And what we are going to do is that IQueryable right here, or IQueryable is going to translate everything into a database. This is what I want to tell you. It does everything in the database before we get the data. But IEnumerable goes in there and give us the data before it apply everything to it. So it's getting interesting. So now let's try to make this one async. And what we're going to do is that we're going to return this. We want to return, let's see that wait here, and then we go to the database, and then we, first of all, our employee threshold. So we already have our employee threshold right here. So we don't want to specify, we get this, right? But when we get this, the first thing we want to do is that we want to transfer this to a queryable, and then we specify the same thing that we did in there. So the only thing that we are changing in here is as enumerable, and here is a queryable. This is the same, but not the same. So it sounds the same, look the same, but not the same. So this will give us all the data as we already explained, and this will then do everything in the database level. So basically this is how it works. So if you are also doing the search, we are doing the search, it's going to be very easy. So the search tool, we can see that we go through all the data because we first get the data. So we are doing a search, maybe we are searching employee by username, and then we are using IEnumerable to do that. And then we say, hey, go to the database, give us everything, and then apply what we are telling you to do. So you are going, as a developer, you decide if this is going to be more performance or it's something that you want. Is the data is not many, just a few data, but imagine we have a lot of users in our application, and then we are going to fetch everything before we apply something to it, which is a lot of work, and our server needs to do a lot of things. So that is where you decide to use IQueryable. So that is the difference. Under the hood, there is difference in it, and I'm using this real world approach to show you how to work with them and the scenarios where you might need this one and you might need this one. Okay, so let's say we want to do a search, and then that is, first of all, we do the search. We search by name, and this is the same, but this time around what we do is that we saw, first of all, let's make this async. Right here, this should be async. So this approach is very good, and then we get all the data. When we get the data, what happens is that we want to return this data in a different format. So return all employee right here. First of all, let's make sure that this is all employee. Better name, all employee, like this. And we want to, first of all, do this as IEnumerable, and then we are going to add some kind of a filter into it. And then we see that way, because we want a name to be right. So where name, the search item name, right, contain. So we don't want to do this. This is not what we want. The AI suggested this, but this is not what so we say that where search item, right, name contains search item. This is not what we want. Okay, name. So here we want to do more fun thing to this, and then we're going to see that string. Okay, so let's try to do this like this. It's a string comparison, right? And then what we do is that when we get this, we want to probably order this, and then we're going to see that ordinarily, right? Good. So when we get that, first of all, order by name, right? So we're going to do this. So order by, and then in here we specify name. Good. So this is it. So this will help us to, let's make sure that this is a week. Okay. So public async, we are getting an error that this shouldn't be like that. Let's see. Okay, so all the employees via employees, see employees to list, and then return our employee, and we are getting an error that, let's see what is going on. The type of IQueryable is not awaitable. So search with IEnumerable is what we are doing, and it shouldn't be doing that. Sorry. So first of all, let's see that this IEnumerable load the data in memory level. So it load the data in a memory level, So when we get this in the memory level, what happens is that we have this. So you see, we want to get the data first, right? So when we get the data, now let's change this name to proper name. We're going to have a proper name like this. So this is what we want. So now get all the data, make sure that there is some comparison. I mean, what the user is trying to enter, a name, is also in the database. When we get it, order it by name, give her the data by name, and then just put everything to list. So this is also where we can use IEnumerable, and we can also use a Queryable. So now let's go in here and then do the same for this, but this is gonna change, right? Okay, so with this, we are not going to get the data first. So you can see the pattern that we have been doing. We can async. You see that anytime we are using IEnumerable or enumerable, we go to the database before. But whenever we are doing Queryable, we just go straight to the database. So if you see in here, we are getting all employees before we apply anything to it. So we get all employees before we apply anything to it. So you can see we are applying here. But so let's start from the top and let's understand this well. So now what we are saying is that the first approach is to get all employee using IEnumerable. And first of all, we want to get all employees in the database first before we return it. So this one we execute and stored everything in this variable, and then we perform everything in this variable that for us. But with this one, we just return everything straightforward because the query goes straight to the database forward and it gives us everything that we want. So that is it. That is the difference. One, get the data first. So this is very easy. So this time around, if you want to get the user when we want to search by name, it's not going to be different. It's not going to be the same as we compare to enumerable. There's going to be some kind of difference in them. And one of them is that, first of all, we want to return this. And then we're going to say that this is our weight. And then we go to the database straightforward because the query does our way. And then we say that the information that we are giving to us, make sure, but we can do it like this. But this is not how we want to do it. Right? So we want to make sure that we use in this framework call, we use .NET here. So what we are doing is that, okay, this suggestion is not what I want it to be like this. So this is what we are doing. They say that we want to make sure that the functions, right? So this is EF call, and you see that like, so the data that the user is trying to put in there, we have to make sure that it's sitting in our database. Give us something like this in the database, right? And order it. This one we have already fetched the data information, so we can perform everything. But this one is going straight to the database and do the work for us. So this is how we work on it. So for the controller, the focus is not on the controller. So I'm going to create the controller and then we get everything in there. So let's create a controller and use Postman to also perform this and see how it works too. But the understanding is that this is how you might approach a real-world solutions or a real-world programs with IQueryable and IEnumerable. So somebody can explain to you, but here we are using a real world scenario where we're going to get the data and where to use it in API level. So the last thing that we want to do before we go into our program.cs is create our controller. So to create a controller in here is very easy. We go to the controller level and say I want to add a new controller. Here, if you want, you can get a controller, but I'm going to create just a class. Let's create a class and name it this IQueryable controller. So I am employee controller. This will work for us. So employee controller. Let's make sure that I have the thing here. This is a controller, and I have the controller already prepared. It's a simple ASP.NET Core controller. So I have the controller here, which does everything for us. So here, let's try to import all the missing stuff. And let's try to also bring this namespace, get employee using IEnumerable. So there is mismatch here, but we're going to do that. So what happened is that the service, the name of the service. So here, get employee, is it paid employee, right? No. So these two services probably know what we want. Get paid. So we want to get service. So let's go and make sure that we have those ones in the service. So first of all, get employee and get employee using IEnumerable. This service is here. And then get employee using IQueryable. So this is what we are interested in the controller level. So here, get all IEnumerable and get all Queryable. So we have this, and this is what we want to have. And this tends not to be part of the interface. So let's go to our interface. And then you see that get paid. We have get paid right here. We don't have those services in the interface, but we have already implemented it in there. So let's go and create that interface. Is very quick. We can go to the service. So the service, this is what we want. So we go here. We go to, let's go to the interface, interface right from here, from the top. And then let's remove the async and do this. And then let's go to the service again. This is controller. And let's go to the service, iService. And then we also want to get this using the IEnumerable. So this is just an interface mistake we made. So we can go in here and we copy this. So this is task, and then this is getting it with Queryable. So we copy the same thing here, and then what we do is that we say that this is going to be a Queryable, IEnumerable. So something like this, and this will work. So in our controller level, if we go back, everything should work as we wanted. So now our controller look good. We need to make sure we clean this. Everything look good right here. So now just create employee, get employee using the Queryable, and get employee using the IEnumerable. So that is very easy. So the next thing we want to do is to go to our program.cs and try to register these services in there. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, we have to add our service as a scope. So if you want to understand how dependency injection work, I already have a video on this YouTube channel where we dive in deep on dependency injection in .NET and how it works and how you can use it. So you can check out that video and you understand what scope mean, and I mean how to add and when to use it. So we add this one as a scope, and I'm going to implement this. And now with our SQLite, we need to configure that one also in here, so we can perform migrations and work with it. So let's bring this, and then we are done. So this is going to create a folder here in our application for us. So now when it comes to our controller, it just gets and gets high paid, and then we pass in all this thing. So what we need to do at this point is go to our terminal right here. What we're going to do, we're going to seed in into this project. So we're going to copy this, and then we paste this right here, and I'm going to list this. So first of all, we're going to say that we create a migration, .NET migration, add a migration. You can give it any name. Don't worry about my name. So you can give it any name that you want, but I want to give it to this name. When it's done, we can see that .NET EF core update database, right? So .NET EF core database update. So let's update the database. So we want to update the migration to the database. That is it. And we are using SQLite, so we are not connecting to any of our local instance. So now this is it. We have our application ready, and we already understand how IQueryable and IEnumerable also work in the services. We have created all the things. The services are doing the same thing, but in a different context, in a different way. So I have my Postman launch here. This is what we are going to use for our API request. So I'm going to put this one out, and we are going to do a request here. So first of all, let's say that we want to create a new stuff. We want to create a new endpoint, and this is going to be created. So let's go to our application here. Let's see how we can run this. Let's start application and see if there is no errors. So application is running, and it's running on this port. So we copy that port, and then we come in here. So first of all, we need to create something before we even get it. So it's kind of easy. So to create that, we have this in our controller. So we're going to say that this is how we do pull request. So let's go to the body raw data, and this is what I want to create. In here, we're going to create a lot of data right here. So first of all, this name, let's hit send for bad request. So not found, because of this route is not found. Let's check this one. Whoa, encoded. So this is not found. 404. Let's go to our controller and check if this is all we are doing. Okay, so this is running on port 5275 / API employee, and we are getting not found. We are doing a post request. Okay, so let's go to the controller, close this one down, and then you see that / API. Okay, so this is going to be create. So we pick in the controller, so which is post request, and then say create. So this is wrong. That is why we are getting not found, because we need to specify the route. Because that this will also pick the employee here. So let's see, this is employees, and why is saying that not found? But let's see if we do we get something. All of them are not found. So what is happening to the route? The route is not hit. So let's see what are we. You can see that the route is not even hit. So our Postman is not finding this route. So what is happening right now is a post request to this. So let's try to figure it out what is happening.